everyone, and welcome to another episode of Faerie, Fable, Librarians. I'm Simona.
And I'm Katie.
And today we're going to be talking about Dota, Dragon's Blood, which is a Netflix animated series, and it's also based on a video game of the same name. But I haven't played the video game, so Katie and I are just going to be focusing on the Netflix animated series.
Yes, well, you're not alone in that. I have never played the video game either. I didn't know it was based off of a video game until I saw the credits. And I was like, oh.
Neither. I really didn't know that either. And we're also going to be focusing on book 1. I know that they have book 1 and 2 on Netflix, but we only watched the first one. Mm-hmm. So essentially, this series is set in a fictional magical realm inhabited by dragons, humans, elves, and other magical beings. And the main character of this story is a dragon knight named Davion, who his fate takes a drastic turn when he kills this elder dragon. And essentially what the elder dragon does is he merges with Davion in order to sort of go into hiding, essentially.
Yeah, but I would like to point out, too, is that he doesn't kill the dragon just for merely sport. It's after this massive battle where another elder dragon was possessed by a demon, which reminds me a lot of Sauron from The Lord of the Rings.
We're going to be, once in a while, we're going to be referring to characters as either Sauron 2.0, etc., because The Lord of the Rings vibes are strong with this one.
Very strong. So the demon possesses this dead elden dragon, and the fire breather dragon, I'm sure he has a name. I don't remember the name of the...
His name is Slyrak.
Slyrak. Thank you, Simona.
You're welcome.
And he gets fatally wounded in the fight. Davion defeats the demon-possessed dragon, and so the dragon is Syriax. Did I say it correctly? Slyrak. Thank you. Sorry.
Go with that, pronounce it Slyrak.
Slyrak. Thank you. He's essentially suffering from his fatal wound, and so Davion is going to give him what they call an honorable death. And in the process of doing that, Slyrax, I guess the best way to explain it is transferring his soul into Davion's. So when Davion starts fighting, he morphs into this dragonoid, humanoid hybrid thing, for lack of a better term. And it's this transformation of which we see in I think episode 2, episode 3, is really quite horrifying for Davion. Because number one, he's a dragon knight, which doesn't necessarily mean that he protects dragons. He fights against dragons. Yeah. And there's this deep-seated prejudice against dragons as a whole, which I don't agree with or approve of, because the dragons didn't do anything to anybody except just be.
Yeah, that's one of the things about this universe that I wasn't really sure about. What role... is it almost like the dragons became these monstrous beings after all these years of being hunted? So this is sort of we need to protect ourselves, we're retaliating. Or, were they always this way and humans are justified in saying, we need to hunt you? It's, excuse me, it's never really clear.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Well, no, I would agree with you in that way, but I also feel like you could almost draw parallels with humans. I don't want to say unreasonable fear, but fear of sharks.
Yeah.
Because when Jaws was released in the 70s, people got so fearful of great white sharks that great white sharks were nearly hunted down to extinction. extinction. I swear I know words. I swear. But
Tuesday.
It is extinction. So, I mean, I feel like because dragons, somewhat like sharks in reality, are fairly unknown to this fictional world, that they are seen as an enemy and something to be feared. And thus, because as human nature goes, when you don't know what it is and you're fearful of it, then you're more likely to destroy it and get rid of it.
Exactly. So when Davion, because after Davion is essentially possessed or taken over by Slyrak, it's the name I'm never gonna get.
I don't necessarily think that Slyrax possesses Davion. I feel like he shares Davion's body.
Merge. Maybe we'll say merge.
I think is a better.
After they merge, Davion essentially blacks out. Like he has no memory of what occurred. He's found by this woman named Mirana and her companion, whose name is Marcy.
Who's a really cool character, I just have to say. She is really
cool. Yes, she's one of the funnier. I liked her character.
Yes.
They find him, and essentially, I think they do realize that something is not quite right with him, and he goes with them because you eventually learn that Mirana is a princess. She's sort of a disgraced princess. She failed in some regard.
And I don't feel like we know what that failure is in book 1. Did you, when you were watching, did they explain what that failure was in later episodes?
I assumed, okay, so essentially Mirana has failed at something, and she and Marcy are trying to retrieve these magical lotuses which were stolen from her goddess's temple, stolen by this elf.
Right.
So I assumed that was her failure, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't recall if it's ever really explained in book 1 why she feels as if she failed. I'm not 100% sure.
Because I feel like just the stealing of the sacred lotuses, although albeit being a very big deal, I don't know that it would necessarily warrant a banishment or an exile.
Yeah, because she's essentially sort of on the run. She's not even open about her identity initially.
Right.
She's going through some shady dealings in order to find the means to find these lotuses. But Davion and Marcy, they basically decide, okay, we're better off together. We sort of have the same goal, especially once they figure out that Davion has merged with this dragon. And essentially when the dragon takes over, it's a lot of bloodlust. Like he decimates these bandits, so to speak. Like he rips them to shreds. Yeah.
We should mention that this animated series is an adult animated series.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of violence. There's some sexual situations, so it's definitely not for children.
No. I do want to say, though, amongst the party of the 3 people that we're speaking about now, the reason why I love Marcy so much is because she's not a speaking character.
Yeah.
She's essentially described as being a mute. But the way she communicates when she's acting as what's Miriam's?
Mirana, I think.
Mirana's scope, essentially, she gives calls by whistling.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very clever way of depicting a character in a way that we don't normally see a character being depicted. Yeah. And I like that she has a front and center kind of a role to play among the party, and she's not just left off to the side.
And she's also very deadly. One of the scenes that I really enjoyed was when Mirana and Marcy are tricked by this devious elf character.
Yes.
Into going to this brothel where essentially he has sold them to the brothel. And of course the men who now own them are sizing them up and saying, you're so breakable, you both are not gonna last. And Mirana essentially says, you should have basically divested me of all my weapons. And I was like, what does she mean?
Yeah.
And then Marcy basically kung fu's her
Oh
way.
my god, that was like the best scene in that whole situation was how this small, petite human just pummels.
Yeah, she basically does a number on them, and because I was saying, like, these women are far too calm.
Yeah.
For people who have they've been divested of weapons. I said they're in a brothel. They're these bulky men,
Yeah.
And I was like they're just too calm. And then I was like, okay, now I understand. Like Marcy is literally just a human weapon. You know?
Yeah.
And they managed to get away. They beat the pulp out of the elf that sold them in. And the elf eventually tells them that in order to accomplish their quest, they have to seek out the Invoker, who is this being possessed of extreme magical powers, and he resides in a tower that is cloaked to human senses. So essentially, Davion, Mirana, and Marcy, while they're traveling, they sort of not only have to avoid Davion, who is very unpredictable. Because there's this comes a little later. They haven't yet reached the tower, and he essentially almost falls. Like, they're being pursued by some dragons. So Princess Mirana and Marcy separate. Like, he sends them on ahead once they've figured out where the tower is, and he's essentially losing himself to the dragon that's merged with him, and he enters almost this other dimensional plane, where he sees the other elder worms of this universe. So essentially in this universe, there are 8 elder worms, and they represent the 8 elements, and they're essential to the stability of the cosmos.
Right.
And when they have Davion in this plane, they essentially are trying to figure out what he's doing there, like how he got there, what happened to Skylark, who is essentially missing. They don't know where he went. But it was such a beautiful scene because I loved the way the dragons were designed. And also there was this one elder worm that was essentially all about, I don't care why he's here, kill him, kill him, kill him.
Yeah.
It was kind of the schizo kind of dragon where like everyone else is like, we should at least hear him out. She was like, no, kill him, kill him.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't want to hear anything that he has to say.
Right.
But it's a very important scene because Davion is forced to confront his own prejudice and why he became a dragon knight in the first place, which is essentially his family was slaughtered by dragons. So it's all about revenge. He wants to kill as many as possible. And they bring up good points about, we're beings who need to survive. Yes, we hunt, but humans also hunt to survive. And if you attack us, do you not expect us to sort of attack back?
Right.
And you can see that he is kind of conflicted. And at the same time, he's desperately trying to retain his own humanity.
Yeah.
At the same time, he also realizes that the dragon that's pursuing Mirana and Marcy is getting closer and closer. So, like, he's begging them, like, tell me how to get out of this plane so I can, go back and help. And eventually, I don't know if they send him back or he manages to get back to his body. But I think he leaves at least obtaining some knowledge as to the importance of the elder worms.
Yeah.
That essentially, if they are destroyed, chaos will erupt. So they're vital to the stability of the world that he inhabits.
Right.
Essentially.
Yeah. And I do want to say as well that the elf who steals the lotus flowers because she wants to reawaken the goddess that they worship. I'm
not sure if it's Fimrin.
Fimrim sounds. Yeah, I mean she wants to reawaken a goddess that supposedly died, and to reclaim land that was taken from them. And it's like, wait a minute, where have I heard this before?
Where have you heard this before?
And I'm like, oh my God, it's The Witcher.
Which, by the way, if you have not seen that episode, the Caffeinated Librarians, we did 2 episodes on The Witcher, so check it out.
Yes, please check it out. But it's like, I know, it's like, again with this storyline again. Why does it seem that elves can't can't keep their land? It's like, I don't want to be seeing another storyline with this, and it's like, it's so old and so outplayed, and I don't like for me with the elves and the Witcher, it's like, okay, I understand what's going on. I understand that they were forced out by the humans, and of course they want to reclaim their land and their inheritance and their culture again. But in this show, it's like, so you want to you committed, you stole sacred lotuses to a race of people who strongly believe in this other goddess of the moon. And you stole it because you want to reawaken a goddess and reclaim land that we don't necessarily know how was stolen from you to begin with. And it's like, this seems a forced. It seemed like to me it was like a forced narrative.
Well, and just to give the viewers some context, so essentially, like Katie said, the elves, they exist in these conclaves, so to speak, and they've been pushed to the margins of society.
Right.
And
like The Witcher.
Exactly. And they believe in this goddess called Mene, and there's supposedly this prophecy. The reason why the elf maiden, I'm just going to call her elf maiden because I'm not sure how you pronounce her name, steals the lotuses because she believes in this prophecy that states that, once these lotuses are in the hands of the elves, the goddess Mene will return and restore them to their proper place, restore order to the world.
Where have we heard the storyline before, Simona?
Where have we heard it before?
It's The Witcher. It's like the prophecy, the reclaiming of land, the stealing of magical artifacts.
There's a lot of similarities. And what you learn is that the ruling religion of this land is a religion to this moon goddess. And the moon goddess, you eventually learn, and her name is Selamene, which is interesting because I just realized that part of her name is the name of the elvish goddess. But what you learn is that Selamene, who calls herself the goddess of the moon, is not actually a goddess. She is essentially this elf who, X amount of centuries ago, power went to her head. She absorbed so much power that she made herself into a deity. And essentially she demands tribute, demands worship. So
she's a really old elf with a god complex.
Exactly. Yes, that's essentially what she is.
Gotcha.
So once her lotuses are stolen, she essentially says, you have now declared war. Kind of reminds me of that Battleship game. If for any of you who know, like when you had, it kind of reminded me of the, what's that?
It's called Battleship.
Yeah, where you poke the pins and then you said, like, you have sunk my battle. So she essentially says, you stole my lotuses. I'm going to sink your battleships. So she has these dedicated soldiers who are essentially religious fanatics. That is what they are.
Yeah, because one of them shows up to the Elven Maiden and her group and slaughters her friends.
So she essentially Selamene gives this dictate: you either submit, worship, and love me, or you will be killed. Of course, there are bands of resistant fighters who are trying to fight back. There are some elves, because their homes are being burned down, they said, we'll submit, we love you, and all that stuff. So there's a lot of things going on. One of the more interesting storylines, to be perfectly honest, is the storyline of the Invoker. And the Invoker is the gentleman that Princess Mirana, Marcy, and Davion go to find in the tower.
Oh, is this the same person that the Elven Maiden was looking for as well? That's what I thought. Okay.
Essentially, they're one and the same. So he's this very old elf with incredible power. And you eventually learn that he and Selamene were lovers, and they had a child together.
Oh, look at that.
The child was incredibly gifted, incredibly intelligent, but she succumbed to this disease. And essentially, you learn through flashbacks that the Invoker had taken his daughter to Selamene and said, save her. And Selamene said to her daughter, I will save you, but swear your loyalty, pledge your love to me. And essentially the daughter said, you are no longer my mother. I will not swear fealty to you. I will not say that I love you. And she essentially let the daughter die.
Wow.
Yeah. So because the daughter saw through the corruption of the magic, and she would not swear fealty. She would not say, no, I don't love you in that way. You're no longer my mother.
Right.
So the Invoker has this gripe, so to speak, with Salamene.
Well, justifiably,
so.
yeah.
I mean, the whole scene with him and his daughter, like his daughter was his world, is one of the more heartbreaking moments, especially when he realizes what disease she has and that he cannot cure her.
Right.
So essentially, the Invoker makes a pact with this incredibly powerful demon who Katie and I have referred to as Sauron 2.0.
Yes.
His name is Terrorblade in the series. And Terrorblade's goal is fairly simple.
It's not an imaginative name at all.
He wants to take over all the Elder Worms, absorb them, so that he can mold and shape the cosmos to his liking.
Of course.
So Sauron or every other villain that you've ever, like, he wants to take over the world.
Every other fantasy villain ever created, written about.
Yeah. So.
Acted. To take over just like Pinky and the Brain.
Exactly.
What are we going to do tonight, Brain? What we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
Exactly. For all of you folks that know that cartoon. So that's essentially, so the Invoker basically, you made this pact with Terrorblade. Basically says, I understand your ultimate goal is the destruction and enslavement of mankind as we know it, but I need your help. So it's sort of like he's so driven by grief that he's basically essentially willing to make this pact in order for Salamene to be robbed of her power and essentially get taken down a few pegs. So there's a lot going on in this show. I mean, the Lotuses are eventually returned, but at that point, Terrorblade has also sort of made the pact. He battles with Salamene, defeats her, and essentially robs her of her power. Davion is still very much merged with Skylark. That hasn't changed.
Right.
The elves are still sort of enslaved. They have not. Mene has not returned.
Right.
And it ends basically where Salamene is bruised and beaten on the floor, and the Invoker comes and he basically says, that he will assist her, but I need you to say that you love me and that you will worship me. So that's essentially how it ends.
Yeah.
So
vengeance.
Very narrow-sighted of the Invoker. Understandable because he's angry,
right?
But at the same time, it's you've allowed the dark one.
Well, it's like Salamene is blinded by power, and she's blinded and corrupted by power, and like essentially the same way, the Invoker is blinded and corrupted by grief and his need for vengeance. That he willingly goes into this contract with Terrorblade in order to get back at Salamene.
Yeah, and it's funny because like you gather that there must have been at one time a moment when the relationship was good. I mean, assuming that's why he was involved with her.
Right.
But based on the flashbacks you do get, the Invoker is essentially a single father raising this daughter in a tower that he created for her. So that his world revolved around his daughter because he built the tower for her.
Right.
He planted flowers for her. And you could see that she was saddened by the absence of the mother, but kind of resigned to it.
Right.
Likewise with, sort of jumping back and forth, likewise with the elves, and maybe book 2 will explain it a bit more, why they're currently so repressed.
When I was looking at
or oppressed, not repressed.
Listen, words do not seem to be working for us today. It's okay. When I was watching Dota, I skipped forward to just read the synopsis of the episode. So for book 2, it seems like a lot more is happening and a lot more is going on. So I don't know if it's within our interest to keep watching and seeing if anything's resolved, because clearly in book 1 nothing is really resolved. Everyone is still
viewers. If you want anyone enjoying this show and you decide to watch book 2, let us know what you think.
Yes, please comment on this video and let us know what you think of the show, and maybe if we get enough of you to tell us why you think it's a great show. We'll probably give it another shot.
And it also reminds me of another show which Netflix has finally greenlit for season 4, The Dragon Prince, which is actually a very good show.
I enjoyed that. Opinion. I mean, I enjoyed that show far more than I enjoyed Dota.
And it's a similar thing, although what I will say is the conflict is better understood to a certain degree, because also in that world, humans have essentially taken over, co-opted magic, and because they were not really supposed to handle such great responsibility, they messed things up essentially for the rest of the world.
I mean, as we as a species are wont to do.
So, and the elves at that point are sort of at war with the humans. So there is like this band of elves that like have this mission to assassinate the king, but they're not necessarily.
They're not displaced.
No,
they have
they're
their
not.
own. They have their own kingdom and their own land. So I mean that's a good show in depicting elves as being more than just these displaced people that are constantly vying for their land and their culture back. So I mean,
it is a really good show, and I'm looking forward to, because I feel like season 4 hasn't happened in forever. But going back to Dota, did you laugh like? And I know it wasn't supposed to be, it wasn't the murder scene, but...
No, I don't know that I got that far.
Oh, when the elf is with her pod, and she's like, now it is time for us to love. And I'm like, what is going to happen?
Yes. No, I didn't laugh. I just kind of like looked at it and I'm like, oh...
Like,
she said, let us show love for our goddess. And I was like... Show love. So what? They're now going to sit in a circle and pray to their goddess as this, And then I looked at, I was like, oh,
they essentially have an orgy.
Oh, that's what's going on.
Yeah, and I remember I was like,
okay.
I was like, okay. like the scene was so like I was rolling my eyes.
I mean, it's like.
I died afterwards. I felt really bad about that.
That's like when one of us like Samele's like fanatic warriors comes because the elven maiden had stolen the lotus flowers, and I mean that scene was really, I don't want to say heart-wrenching because we don't know much of the characters to actually be that invested in it, which I found to be really disappointing for the show, because it's like, yes, I understand that there's a game that's out there. I don't know how long the game has been out in the world, as it were, and I feel like if you know the game, then you know the characters.
Yeah.
So I feel like the creators of this show maybe did somewhat of a disservice to those of us who haven't played the game. Because I don't know whether or not these characters are original to the show or original to the video game.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly weren't with her pod enough to really develop any emotional attachment.
Right. So it's like you watch this whole scene unfold, and it's like, oh, okay, this is happening. All right, yay! It's like I was like not like going, wait, what? What's going on? No, this can't be happening. I like these characters. What are you doing? It's not the reaction that I had. And so it's like, it's hard to know whether or not the creators of the show, again, had created these characters for this show, or if they're characters from the game itself. But I don't know, because I didn't know it was a game, and I've never played the game.
Yeah. So what we can conclude, at least from the way book 1 has ended, is that stuff is about to hit the fan, so to speak.
Yes, no, that's a very good way to describe it, for sure.
And also, Davion's. Can we? No. Okay.
Good job, Simona.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So like a character we haven't touched upon, Caden, which is Davion's mentor. Also, if you're familiar with The Witcher, I can't recall what the character.
Vesemir.
Yes. So he's the mentor, who is quick to pick up on the fact that Davion is not all together. Davion So in addition to being hunted by dragons, Davion is also being hunted by his order.
Right. And it's I can only imagine that it's like a complete and utter betrayal towards Davion. Like he feels that they have abandoned him and betrayed him, and it's like, well, you know, he essentially grew up with these warriors, and it's like now I'm a fugitive against, you know.
So, and Caden, of course, like his goal is to like hunt every dragon, because about like 20 years ago, 29 of his like fellow dragon knights were slaughtered by this elder worm, which I believe is Skylark, is the elder worm that slaughtered all of his companions. So he's essentially hunting after him. And he becomes aware that Skylark is has merged with Davion, but he can't harm either, essentially, you know. So that's all. So there's a lot going on in this series. There's like multiple fights occurring.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know who made the decision to make it 8 episodes and to make it like 25 minutes each, because they've stuffed so much into these short episodes that it's almost too much. You're like speeding through all of everything that's going on. You're not letting enough time for the story to actually just unfold naturally. And like they're forced, it's like I almost feel like that they're forcing certain things to happen when they really shouldn't be happening now. So just watching the few episodes that I did watch, I'm like, we're going through this already? She's revealing this now? I mean, it's like...
Yeah, and a part of me, even with Salamene, which is the big reveal as to that, but in a way, kind of looking at Salamene, I kind of had a feeling that she wasn't who she claimed to be anyway.
Right.
And I think at this point, you know, her followers are so dedicated to her. She's essentially a cult leader.
Yeah.
That's what she is. And I'm kind of curious what the fallout will be, you know, once she's lost her powers. I'm curious if the Invoker will pick up the cult and sort of now he becomes the de facto god that everyone has to pay homage to. Like, I'm curious if that's how he's going to go.
Yeah. And I mean, just touching back on like forcing storylines and forcing reveals that I feel like I was getting in, like that the show was doing. Like when we first see the princess Marana, thank you. I mean, this just goes to show how invested I was in this show. You see her already, I know she's a princess. The crown that she wears, just her entire arrogant air, I want to call it, when she first meets Davion. It's like, oh, you're the princess character. Okay, I see. So like there was no attempt to like hide the fact like who she is. And like there was no slow reveal, big up to be like slow, like big reveal to be like, no.
Yeah.
What? You know, so it's like, it's like I have this really sense of like being rushed and being very disappointed in like how things were revealed and taken. And I was like, oh,
certain things, you know, probably could have just been done better. I don't know. It was very difficult for me to be really invested in the story. Like the part I enjoyed most were the parts about the Invoker.
Yeah.
I found it more engaging.
Yeah. And I feel like too, if I was able to keep watching, that my parts that I would be more interested in, it's like when we learn more about the dragons, because I dragons are like one of my favorite mythological creatures, and just to see how this show takes the mythology of dragons and what they are would have been very interesting to me to see. But I don't know if it's worth going through it all.
Even going back to Dragon Prince, which I really think once season 4 is released, we should do it.
Yes.
The dragons also play a pivotal role in that series as well.
Yeah.
But I just think that the mythology around the world is a bit better established.
In Dragon Prince.
In Dragon Prince.
Yeah.
You get a greater sense of the core issues that are plaguing this particular world, like the constant wars, the misunderstandings, that dragons are so rare, why they're so rare, why they're so precious.
Right.
You also just have, I think, better developed characters. I think you really become invested in the characters.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really invested in, is his name Ruhan?
It's been so long since I've seen the show.
And this is spoilers, I really want him to be reunited with his boyfriend. The boyfriend needs to learn that he's still alive.
I have to start watching that show again.
Yes,
it's been a very long time since I watched it.
I was looking for updates because they were slowly revealing, because at the end of each episode they have an illustration which hints as to what's going on.
I do remember that. Yeah.
And I was like, is this his boyfriend? People speculating who this elf character, and then they were being sly about who it was and not really revealing it until a certain point.
I'm just gonna say that once I'm done watching Peaky Blinders, I'll start watching that again, because I have to finish Peaky Blinders before I start any other series.
So, I mean, I know we still have enough time, but I don't really know how much more I want to say about this.
I don't really. I mean, Dota, for what it is at least entertaining to some extent. I just find it to be rather, from all the stuff that I have seen, I find this show to be a little lackluster and a little disappointing to me. And then that's just my opinion. I don't know what our fellow viewers think of the show.
The game might be a lot better, because I think it's taken from, because the game I think spans a few, I don't know how to refer. I was going to say editions, but that's not how games are referred to. But different storylines,
sequels. Yeah.
So it could be that the world of the games is richer than what they were able to convey in the actual anime, and I'm sure they changed things around to probably fit the format of an anime.
Right.
So to be fair, the games could be a lot better.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I mean, this could have been made with the fans in mind. Essentially, the fans will know what we're talking about or who these characters are. It kind of reminds me of when they made a Final Fantasy movie. And, I was so lost because, it was made for fans of the game who, know who these characters are, know where they are in this point of the story. So while I enjoyed the movie, I couldn't enjoy it fully as if I had been playing the video games and knew these characters.
Right.
So it could be that is indeed the case.
Yeah.
Where if you haven't played this game, you don't know what's going on. And even comparing it to our previous episode, Vox Machina, which, by the way, is up. So if you haven't watched it, watch it.
It is up. Again, another adult animated series. But fabulous.
Much better.
Yes.
So, with that video game, it was made for fans who have been following the campaign. But yet, even though I had no knowledge, I could still follow along with the story.
Yeah.
I had no, hard time figuring, okay, this is this character. I understand this character's motivations. I understand where the story is going.
Yeah.
So it did a good job of that.
Do you remember what the Final Fantasy movie was?
Oh no, honestly I don't. It's been so many years since I watched it. I can't even remember.
Yeah.
But I know there was
the spirits within.
Yes. Thank you, Lou.
It's pretty
bad. But yeah, that essentially was and there were a lot of allusions to characters of who is this character? But then again, if you played the games, you know these characters.
Right.
So essentially, like, when all these other characters eventually show up on the screen to join the maybe, like, everyone, like, I'm sure if you're famous, like, oh, that's so-and-so. But for me, it was like, oh, that's a cool vampiric kind of dude.
Right.
Don't know who this is.
Right.
But they all sort of show up at the end to help out the main character fight off the big bad, which appears for like 1 second and then is like gone.
Yeah.
And it was also like the case if you ever watched the film Firefly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Firefly was a film created by Josh Whedon, and it's based on his characters from his, Serenity is a film that was created by Josh Whedon, which is based on his Firefly series, which only lasted for 1 season. I watched...
And apparently also full of holes and
True,
problems.
but I did enjoy it, and there's... maybe one day we'll do a Firefly, because I think that would be cool, too. And there's a reason why it flopped, at least in my opinion. But why I bring it up was that I watched Serenity.
Mm-hmm.
And when I watched the movie, I was like, this is cool. Who are these characters?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Right.
And one of the complaints was that it was definitely a film made for fans. So
Right.
essentially, if you had no clue about the Firefly universe, you would not be able to follow the storyline of Serenity.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least be emotionally invested in the characters because you had no idea who they were.
Right.
So once I figured out, okay, this is based on a series, I borrowed the series, loved it. I said, oh, unfortunately, it's only one. But I understood the film better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes when you're creating products with only fans in mind, that could be the detriment of your own story,
Right.
essentially.
Right. Unless
And
you're
it
like
could-
M.
yeah.
Night. Unless you're like M. Night Shyamalan, who did Avatar: The Last Airbender and just destroyed it for fans and non-fans alike of the original animated show. Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that.
there is. Yes.
So I think that's probably what Dota's issue is.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm sure in book 2, more of these questions are answered. I know they have several, I think, seasons planned.
Right.
I think. So I'm sure more of
You
these
hope.
questions will be answered.
Yeah.
I am just not sure if I'm terribly invested in figuring out what's going to happen. But the
Right.
point is, it's there on Netflix.
Yes.
So if you are invested, you can watch it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I guess that's all I have to say for now.
Yeah, I mean that's all I really
Everything
have to say about the show. It surprised me how much of a parallel I saw with the elves of the show and the elves of The Witcher, and it's like, oh, I'm watching the same story again.
And I think it's hard. I think
Yeah.
it kind of reminds me of when, because like for anyone familiar with Tolkien, he is pretty much considered the father of like the high fantasy novel, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, all those who follow afterwards bear the burden of kind of being in his shadow, and that essentially nothing can be original.
Right.
Unless you're like Game of Thrones, which I don't know if that was like Martin's like answer to Tolkien. I'm not like Lou, since you know Game of Thrones. Was Game of Thrones supposed to be like a response to sort of the nobility within like Tolkien's universe, like where everyone is so good? Maybe I just made that up.
Yeah, no,
Ignore it. I probably just made that up.
Game of Thrones is essentially the War of the Roses in a fantasy setting.
Yeah, the reason why I brought that up is because I remember Philip Pullman, who wrote what is that series called? Something Compass.
The Golden Compass?
Yes. He essentially wrote that, and that was, I think, a response to like C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, like the almost too good nature. Like, I think that was his response. It was supposed to be the antithesis of like C.S. Lewis's story.
Okay.
So that's where I kind of thought that Throne of Glass was supposed to be something similar, but maybe I just made that up. But and where was I going with this? I
don't know.
George R. R. Martin has criticized Tolkien.
Oh,
a
okay.
lot, but I don't know that it doesn't say anything about him writing the Game of Thrones series to like dispute him or anything like that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So you knew something.
I
You
knew
just
something.
wasn't.
Okay, so my point
You knew
wasn't.
something, but you didn't know everything.
Thank you.
You didn't know nothing.
It's like Jon Snow.
No, that was Tyrion Lannister.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he drinks and he knows stuff.
But doesn't Jon?
knows.
Snow knows nothing.
Jon Snow knows nothing.
Yeah. So like Jon Snow, I know nothing, and I will be told constantly throughout the course of the series run that I know nothing. amazing how he's such a pivotal, and like he really does know nothing. But we'll have our Game of Thrones episode, the Caffeinated Librarians, a little later in the year.
Yes.
We'll get there. But the point is originality. That was my long-winded point.
The originality of fantasy.
It's really hard. I think especially when you're in a genre like where it's like men, elves, wizards, dragons. Yeah. I don't know how original you can really be. It's hard.
No, this is true. This is true. I mean, you could go as far as like George and the Dragon. Yeah. That's more of a medieval tale of where a dragon is involved, but it's so original, not really. But I mean, I think for elves essentially, or like fae, I think Sarah J. Maas does a really good job at being as original as you can possibly be with those areas of fantasy.
Yeah, and like the beauty is that, you know, you can sort of work with like the bare bones shell of things and then sort of develop from there, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you as always for spending time with us. This was our Dota episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. And if you have any opinions, please share it. We love to get comments. So share.
Please.
All right, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.